Good evening and welcome to Inside Government, a public affairs show brought to you by Cayuga Community College for the spring 2021 semester here. And this is a show that's broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. The Auburn School District, like most New York school districts, is still trying to figure out how we can get students back into the classroom 5 days a week, now that some safety protocols have started to be loosened. In Onondaga County, the district there is now dealing with changes approved by Health Commissioner Dr. Gupta that allows changes to a certain degree about going back for regular sessions. But there are questions about spacing and busing. But we've asked Auburn Superintendent of Schools, Jeff Pirozzolo, who is most likely now on the way to hold the record for most guest appearances in a semester, to give us a district update about getting students back in the classroom, because there are some districts in Cayuga County that are there 5 days a week, but Auburn has had some other issues with spacing and busing they have to deal with. We're also going to talk to them about some education trends and what is going on with distance learning. And we're also going to talk to them a little bit about a recently announced $22 million is coming to Auburn, but we don't know if that's the Auburn School District, though he said he'll take it. So welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me, Guy.
So let's talk about the money first, because that seems to be, so last night you and I apparently watched the same news program and said, Auburn getting $22 million. So has a check arrived? Is it coming to you? Is it to the city? Is it to Cayuga County, or do you not know?
Well, you know, Mayor Quill probably wouldn't like this, but I was looking for Enlarged City School District after the Auburn. So we have not been notified. We know that the state is going to be receiving billions of dollars. That was not actually in the first aid runs that the governor put out. So we're expecting to get more school aid. We don't know what that looks like, and nobody has explained to us what the money coming into Auburn.
Well, enough elected officials will take press releases to let you know that they deserve the credit. I want to ask you about this, whether it's the $22 million or something. Let's talk about what you will get and how you will get it. So, do you think this is money coming directly from Washington to the district, or from Washington to the state?
And that's what our concern is, because you know what it is. It's that shell game. So
well, they take Albany has there was aid last summer, and if I remember your last interview or the interview before, you said that Albany did take a cut of what was supposed to come to districts like Auburn.
So they gave us the COVID relief aid, but then they took it away in another aid slot. So we never really got more money.
So you're hoping that the check is going to be made out to the district and sent to Thornton Ave?
From Washington.
From Washington.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you, again, it would be nice if it's 20, do you have an idea on a ballpark?
No.
Of how much, so nobody's basically, I just thought it was interesting. They gave these three amounts, and I'm sure everybody was looking at it, well, who's getting it?
Correct.
What would you think the money would go towards?
Well,
whether it's $1 or $22 million.
It would go to our gap for this year. Because right now, we still have a $2.5 million deficit. So, you know, we're hoping to get the money so we can at least have an even balanced budget for next school year. But also, there are so many positions that we need to hire in Auburn.
So, you're going to be on in a couple of weeks to talk about budget only.
Correct.
I don't want to get too much into budget right now. But some of this will cover that, and that gap will cover what would be considered health and safety, because you've had some expenditures that you did not expect on February 28th, 2020.
Lisa Green, last I spoke with her, we're in about $2 million we've spent on COVID alone this year. Since last March, about $2 million.
So even if you got $2 million, that would cover that.
Correct.
And you're still $500,000 short.
Correct.
So part of the bill, an earlier version, was that it was going to, 20% of the money has to go to what's called learning loss. First of all, what is learning loss in your mind?
Learning loss are these poor children that haven't been in school in person since last March.
So where does that what would you spend 20% on? Is that on plexiglass? Is that on dividers? Is it on renting more buses? Because we'll get into busing in a second. That's one of your dilemmas. Where does that, where would you spend that money?
we would like to use that 20% just to get our kids back into school 4 or 5 days a week. So whether it's on COVID-related cleaning or whether it's the plexiglass, whatever we can do to get our kids back into school. Because again, I'm sure you're going to ask me about Onondaga County as well. You know.
Well, that seems to be part of the confusion. So
Right.
let me take a step back. The governor's in a little bit of trouble right now, but it has nothing to do with you.
Yes.
But it could deal with you because some of his powers were restricted last week, and it's assumed that tomorrow he'll get a bill on his desk and he will sign it, which will reduce some of his oversight and powers dealing with COVID. Right now you have 62 different plans out there with a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about sports at the end of this. Does that mean, are you worried that by the governor losing those powers, you're now going to have dozens of agencies now giving you, even on top of that, another mishmash of direction?
We're very concerned. You know, again, I'm waiting for the New York State Department of Health to come out with some guidance as well. And Senator Helming had a great article in the paper today. You know, we've been asking, I think the last time I spoke to you, is when are we going to reduce the restrictions from 6 foot to 3 foot? You know, that's really what we need to get our kids all back into the classroom.
So Onondaga County's health commissioner, and we don't necessarily have one equivalent here. We have Kathleen Cuddy, but maybe not with the broader discretionary powers that they do because they have a county executive, and it's about the form of government. We won't get into that. But Dr. Gupta made some decisions or made some announcements last week. It seemed like Onondaga County had had questions for districts there in 2 areas. One was busing and one was social distancing. It sounds like she said, but this is only for Onondaga County, this is not necessarily Cayuga, that they could reduce from 6 to 3. Am I correct on that? Is that your interpretation?
It is my interpretation, and I've seen some of the surveys superintendents from Onondaga have sent out to their community, to the parents. And that's, and I'm wondering who gave them to go ahead to do that, because we're waiting for the same go ahead.
So are you expecting either Kathleen Cuddy or Chair Aileen McNabb Coleman to send a notice to you and the other 7 of 9 districts that are Cayuga County, the Cayuga County BOCES, to allow you to reduce from 6 to 3?
From my conversation with the Commissioner of Education 2 weeks ago, she said until we get that guidance that is given from either the governor's office, the New York State Department of Health, or your own county health department, that we have to maintain the 6 feet until we get other guidance.
So I'm assuming since last Wednesday you have talked to local officials in Cayuga County. Where are they in telling you?
Nobody has an answer.
Because they don't think they have the authority, or they're risk adverse, which, by the way, is an understandable.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. No, I think everybody's wondering who has the authority to make the change. And I think Senator Helming put that in there. She asked that question.
So do you think Dr. Gupta overstepped their authority, or because they are a larger county executive base, we don't have that here?
Right. Either they know something we don't know, or you know, they're just trying to get the ball rolling to get kids back into school. So
the other issue that districts seem to be responding to, because once you made that announcement, that you had the news reported a number of districts responding, and they said, okay, spacing is one issue, and you, if it was alone the issue of just spacing, and you could go from 6 to 3, you could open up.
Absolutely.
The other issue was busing.
Right.
So busing is a little bit more complex. What is the issue?
Well, to me, looking at it, if you're going to go from 6 feet to 3 foot in the classroom, I would hope we would be able to double the space size in the buses as well. So if we can only get 22 kids in a 66 passenger bus, we need to be able to get 44 students in a 66 passenger bus. That would help us to at least the transportation piece to get us closer to the 4 or 5 days.
Okay, so you don't think you could do, if they just gave you the 6 to 3 in the buildings, that's not enough for you to go to 5 days?
We would have to ask for parents to help us with transporting children to school.
Okay, so let's walk through that, and then we'll get into remote numbers and all that. So what's a walkable school, first of all, for those who may not know that?
So for Genesee Elementary School, that is a walkable school. So for elementary kids, it's for any student that lives under a mile from an elementary school, then they walk.
So-
Anything over a mile, they receive transportation.
So Casey is not a walkable school anymore?
There's many students that are living under the mile that still walk to school.
Okay, but do you still have buses that show up at Genesee and Casey?
We have buses that show up to all of our elementary schools.
So it's not
The-
truly a walkable in the sense that every single student who goes to Genesee walks?
It is. Every student that goes to Genesee walks except for our special education runs.
And how about at Casey?
Half the kids walk and
Okay.
half are bus, just like all of our other elementary schools.
So, and I have a number of questions that came to me about parent burden. We'll get to that in a
Oh, yeah.
second, because not like anything you haven't heard yet. Is the issue of, is the onus then on parents to do transportation?
So again, any student that lives over a mile, we transport elementary. Mile and a half, we transport to the junior high. 2 miles or more, we transport to the high school. Anyone that falls below those, then it is up to the parents to be able to transport them or the children walk to school. And that's what our policy reads. And we're a half mile under what education law is. So we actually provide more transportation than a lot of school districts.
And could you, if you had to, change that half mile in the middle of a school year?
So if we went from a mile to a mile and a half, no, we'd have to have a vote from the community.
Well, you can't just do it arbitrarily. as a
Correct.
board. Okay, so let's go back to just the 6 and 3.
Yep.
By 6 and 3, again, listening to one of the interviews in Onondaga County, it looked like if they went to that, they would have to put plexiglass dividers in. I asked an 8-year-old yesterday before I wrote this question. They do not have at Herman, which I'm familiar with, plexiglass dividers. Is that something that you would have to invest in even if you went from 6 to 3?
Again, there's no guidance out there at all. This is what Onondaga has come up with. So this is what was presented to the superintendents. And I believe Onondaga County also said the county is going to help pay for that. So the school districts wouldn't have that burden. So there's a couple of different things there. The plexiglass dividers, again, I don't know what they're for because most of our air that comes out of us goes straight up in the air.
Well,
So
part of the money, and we talked about the 20% for learning loss, part of it also is HVAC systems.
correct.
And is that on your list as well, that you have to make up? I know we talked about it in the fall, I think, when you went back, that you had made some upgrades or installed, you had some compliance.
Yep.
You didn't have compliance issues, you had met compliance. I don't know if there's new compliance since from the CDC. Do you see that as a capital expense you're going to have to make sooner than later as well?
Thank goodness we're in a capital project right now. We're in a $43.7 million capital project. So some of our infiltration systems are being upgraded anyways.
Will they be completed by fall?
No, not in all the buildings, but we have filters in all of our buildings right now that are in compliance.
So if you had to go to plexiglass, say they mandate that, I'm sure somebody in your staff has started to figure out, other than you should have invested in plexiglass stock, that a district can't do 2 years ago. Any idea how much that's going to cost?
About $250,000.
Okay.
And again, what are we going to need these for 2 months to the end of the school year? So we invest all this money in this plexiglass, and how long are we going to be utilizing it for? So again, there wasn't much guidance on plexiglass once you're sitting 6 feet away. So Onondaga County wrote that if we're going 3 foot, they have to have the barriers. Again, I think that was what they came up with.
But until you get determination that way. So let's go back to Genesee, my alma mater. If that is a walkable school, if you were able to go from 6 to 3, could you at least at Genesee go 5 days a week, or is it an all or nothing?
So what I would look at doing, and for the parents, because I haven't sent surveys out to the parents again, because we keep hearing every week that new guidance is coming out. What we would do at our elementary is we would go 5 days a week. We would still give parents the choice if they wanted to stay remote for the remainder
At all
of the year.
5 or just those that are walkable?
Nope, for our elementary schools, as long as we can get 44 kids in a bus, we would open up 5 days a week.
So without busing, you will not open up just, say, Genesee alone?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. We want this to be for all of our children.
So one thought that I've heard from parents and teachers in the last couple of days since Dr. Gupta's announcements was that if the district is going to do this, it's going to have to wait till after Easter break, which is about 3 weeks from now. Could you, if you were given direction this week, and I know there are a lot of ifs here, could you implement something right after Easter?
Yes, oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
But you would start with elementary?
Right, and I'll be speaking at the board meeting this evening, because our seniors now, we're in a rush for graduation. So, you know, to meet commencement requirements, we have still some students that are seniors that are still fully remote. We are going to open up for our seniors only right now to go 4 days a week, starting hopefully next week.
Okay.
And
So some of this will be piecemeal. So you may not, I point this way because that's where the junior high is, out that angle. At the junior high, they may be last in this whole group.
The problem with our junior high school, and again, this is our buildings, the makeup of them, our classrooms are so big at the high school, we can get 16 to 18 desks at 6 feet away from each other. Our junior high has some of the smallest classrooms in the school district.
But the holdup at the high school has been busing still.
No, it's really the numbers. We're going to move forward and utilize some of the bigger classrooms for our senior classes so that we can get our seniors in to make sure that they graduate on time. So time is of an essence for our seniors. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot with room availability and sizes of the rooms. But if we could get down to 3 foot, we could get all of our kids back into the classrooms.
So let's just deal some basics, and then I want to go back to this survey issue. So how many students do you roughly know right now are just in school 2 days a week?
Probably around 60%.
60% of about 4,400.
Yep, 60 to 70%. Our numbers have gone up. More students have come back into the hybrid.
Versus the reverse going
Correct,
out.
correct.
Are they allowed to go remote if a parent asks?
Yeah, at the secondary level, they can go remote, and they just follow their schedule as they always have. Elementary is a little bit more difficult because we have the remote academy.
Okay.
So we backfilled some of those classroom spaces because some of our kids that were completely remote have now gone back to the hybrid model. So we got some empty seats to move some other kids.
So about 2,000 students are remote, roughly, 1,800 to 2,000.
Yeah, it's under 2,000 now.
And in doing that, I know some school districts, Neil O'Brien will be here, I think, next week. He's 5 days a week because his buildings are set up differently.
Correct.
Of the 7 Cayuga County schools in the Cayuga Onondaga BOCES, which is 9, we're not going to count the 2 in Onondaga right now. How many are 5 days a week?
The majority are 5 days a week for elementary, and secondary. There's a few school districts that are on the hybrid for secondary only.
So Auburn is an outlier right now.
Correct. And Southern Cayuga might be hybrid elementary as well because of geographics. They don't have enough busing to get kids into school.
You mentioned the survey, and I know we talked about this, so I don't want to cover old ground again, but you had talked about you were going to do the survey, and then you had the spikes at Thanksgiving and then Christmas. You pulled away from doing that. Are you in a position now that you think you have to do a survey again?
We still, if I'm going to be able to offer 4 or 5 days of school for our students to come back in person, yeah, we would still need that information, especially for the remote academy at the elementary schools. So yeah, I would still put something out there, or phone calls to the students that are remote right now. to see if they're willing to come back.
Do you have any idea what number that is of that 1,800?
For the elementary, for 5 buildings, yeah, we're probably about 600, 500 for elementary schools.
That would come back.
Oh, no, that are completely remote at the
So
elementary.
of that 500, how many do you think would come back?
I would hope the majority of them would be coming
So
back.
you would see a drop, if you could go back to 4 or 5 days a week, you would see remote drop dramatically.
I believe so. I think daycare issues alone, we would be able to take care of that because our parents are, they're struggling.
Does that mean you would invite groups like the Y to continue to do after-school programming?
Yep.
So
Yes.
that there's some coverage till 5 o'clock for
Yep.
parents?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to talk about parents because I got a number of questions. Again, nothing you haven't heard before,
Yeah.
but they've asked me to ask this, and I think there's some good questions. So the questions from parents usually fall into 2 categories. Let's deal with the first one, and that is about children falling behind. In this case, this is a kindergarten parent is asked, how do I ensure that the district is not allowing my student, who's there for the first time ever, 2 days a week, falling behind?
Yeah. And that's a great question. That's a struggle that we're having across the state. We're worried about the learning gaps of our children.
So do you think there is a learning gap?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I believe kids are still learning, but they're learning differently, right?
Okay.
They're learning about COVID. They're learning about technology. They're learning other things, but are we really pinpointing reading and math?
So what do you say to this kindergarten parent that says, I don't know if it's a girl or boy, but I'm worried my child's falling behind.
So
What's the district doing? We talk about that loss gap and all that, those other things. What does the district do?
So a couple of things that we're working as a county, and I'm also working with just our team locally in Auburn, is some type of summer school program. We're trying to figure out a reading program for our elementary students, and working with other districts for secondary summer education. But again, what we want to do is skill-based. So it's more of the reading, it's more of the math, it's more of those pieces during the summer.
In person?
We're going to try to do in person, but we would also figure out a way to do it remotely so we wouldn't leave any children behind.
And there's a cost to that.
There is a cost.
So the secondary question, not a second question, but a secondary question to just the issue of falling behind is this parent says, they're going 2 days a week, but there's really not any real big Zoom programming on the 3rd and 4th day.
Right.
So originally when this was sold, I'm not saying just Auburn, I'm talking about everywhere. If you went to a hybrid, 2 days in class, there would be enough work on the 3rd and 4th day. And that most likely becomes even more of a challenge when you're talking about kindergarten, 1st graders. But where are we on this 3rd and 4th day? There's not a 5th day. So are we really only having students, I think somebody I talked to the other day, last week said, we've only been in school 24 days.
Yeah, and
out of 180.
Right, and that's a huge issue. That's why we need to get our kids back to school in person.
So why isn't there enough? Is it a problem with contractually or is it just time-wise you just can't get people to do it? And I will tell you, I've watched some of the Zoom meetings, and they're labor-intensive. They're not. It's not putting a video on.
Right. So what our goal was this year was to get the kids in person a couple days a week. The other 2 days would be more pre-recorded. That's what we do on Fridays for 7 to 8 hours, is we do those recordings. We upload all the work for the week so that our children have access to it. So if they're doing a guided math lesson and they're not in school that day, they can go to the website, hit the Google Classroom, and watch that pre-recorded thing to keep them on pace so that it is more 4 days of learning versus just 2 days.
And so that leads to the second issue, and that is a number of emails. Parents didn't sign up to be teachers. And they become more frustrated because they didn't sign up to be teachers, but they're still paying property taxes
I get that
Again?
all the time. Oh, I get it all the time.
So when do you see relief in either of those categories, either on the tax side, which I doubt, in my own opinion, or where parents aren't going to be, really, they're doing 3/5. I mean, they would, I don't mean to generalize this, and I love the teachers that we have, and I think I wrote you the other day. I thought they're terrific, but they would say they're doing 3/5 of what a teacher would normally do in a given week.
Yeah, and
Where do they see relief?
And again, our teachers are doing way more than what we normally do when kids come in every day, because they're videoing, they're on Google Classroom, they're doing so much work. They're doing 3 different preps, which is complete remote preps. Some are doing the hybrid and remote at the same time, and then of course the in-person lessons. So they're tripled up on what they're doing, our teachers as well. But yes, our parents have taken the brunt of a lot of this. And a lot of our teachers also have younger children.
Right.
So not only are they doing their teaching of 3 different lessons, but they're also trying to educate their children when they get home. And we've talked to the board about that when it comes to raising taxes and the school budget. And, it just puts you so far behind, because Auburn, one of the reasons we're in this mess is because we don't receive the foundation aid that other school districts do. And if we had more staff, and more space, if we still had West Middle School and we had more staff, it may look different. But because of the lack of aid that we receive, it's very difficult.
So I want to talk about 2 different things before we finish up. We've got about 5 minutes. So one is I sent you a piece from the Kiplinger letter, which had some data about absenteeism. You've been here in the past to talk about you being the truant officer,
Yeah.
looking at the little rascals I see with the badge and all that when I was a kid. How big of an issue is absenteeism right now?
Huge. It's huge. And the reason is because a lot of our families that are 100% remote are not connecting. Our social workers, our counselors, our school psychologists, our administrators, they're doing home visits. They're constantly trying to communicate with these families, but the chronic absenteeism is a big issue.
So are you seeing also, this article mentioned a number of parents having gap years, literally for elementary and secondary school children. Are you seeing parents taking their kids totally out of school for a year?
I believe our kindergarten, our enrollment's down this year.
Because of that,
and,
okay.
and it's because we did not have anywhere as close to the number of kindergarten students register.
What about the issue of tutoring, and are there options for people to there's the Khan Academy, which is an online resource. Are there tutoring options out there for parents to help their children?
And there are, but we want to provide those. So that's sort of how we're looking at this summer school piece of it, and we're looking at some multi-age classrooms for next year for those kids to catch them up. So we're actually looking at how we're going to instruct next year in the beginning of the year, because our kids are going to need some catch-up material.
So I don't want to get to the fall too quickly, but are you thinking we're going to have remote classes in the fall at this rate?
From what we're being told from the commissioner's office, for budgeting purpose, is to plan on remote learning for the next school year and include that in your budget.
So even if you get vaccinations at 70% and herd immunity, you still think that's going to be?
From what we're being told is to plan for it.
Okay. Last subject real quickly, sports.
Mm-hmm.
You were on here last time. You've got 3 seasons that you're playing in the spring. What are they?
Well, no, this is fall 2.
That's what I mean. You've got fall, a spring,
yeah.
and a secondary
So
spring.
we're finishing the winter season this week. Fall 2
So
started
things like hockey tonight.
Hockey, basketball, those things will be ending this week. Also on Monday, football, volleyball, and cheerleading started up. That will be running through mid-May to the end of May.
So does that mean shorter seasons?
It does.
It does, okay.
It does. And then we'll be starting up our spring sports mid-April, and the only sport that will be included in spring will be wrestling.
And so at this point, there's also some questions about who can attend these.
Yeah.
So what is the current Auburn policy when it comes to attendance at games?
The current policy is what the New York State guidelines are, 2 spectators per student athlete.
And that limit is set by the state, or is that
Yes.
a league? So tonight, we're taping this on Tuesday, there's supposed to be a Skinny Atlas Auburn rivalry game. That's been canceled. Why?
Well, because when we met, we started the winter season with no spectators, just to make sure that we could get our kids to have the opportunity to play a sport. As the numbers continue to go down, we asked Kathleen, could we start bringing Kathleen Cuddy, our executive director for the Cayuga County Health Department. We worked with her. We agreed that we could start letting some spectators in. We started with home spectators only, so each student athlete could bring 2 spectators, and it did not have to be immediate family. It was any 2 spectators that the student athlete chose to do. And Skinny Atlas wanted to bring their visiting parents to the hockey game. We are not there yet. We are with just our local.
But Auburn had played at West Genesee a couple weeks ago, and they didn't allow.
No.
Is this the problem with 62 different?
There's too many rules out there, and the official rule was our league was not going to allow spectators. There was a couple of school districts that did. As we saw it was safer, we said, okay, we'll allow home spectators. Well, some school districts, there's a very few, that are allowing home and visitors, and we're not one.
Okay. You see that changing over time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It'll change probably for fall too.
Okay. So fall 2 or this coming fall?
Yeah, well, again, because football will be outside. The outside sports, I see home and visiting spectators. For home that are inside, we're just doing.
So do you see
home.
people going? If I wanted to go to a Holland Stadium game for football, not that I have an interest in it. Sorry, Coach Moskov, but I think he does a wonderful job. But if I wanted to go, would I be able to go?
As of right now, the guidelines do not allow, because we want capacity. Give us a percentage. But right now, they're just giving us the 2 spectators.
And I hope Coach Moskov
athlete.
has a terrific season.
Yeah, me too.
Me too. Our guest has been Auburn Superintendent of Schools, Jeff Pirozzolo, to talk to us about COVID. Thanks for taking the time again. Like I said, you are the most often guest this spring right now. You're going to be back in a couple weeks to talk about just the budget issue, because that's big for Auburn. And by that time, you might know what you might have gotten out of 22 million.
I think that conversation will expand a little.
On there. So on Thursday, we'll be back with East Hill Medical's Executive Director, Keith Cutler, whose agency was founded 50 years ago in Cayuga County. We're talking about the agency's history as well as the services they provide. Next Tuesday, the Cayuga Seneca Community Action Agency's Director of Family and Victim Services, Frank Barwinczak, will be in to discuss the increase in domestic violence cases locally. And then next Thursday, as we mentioned, we'll have Port Barron Superintendent of Schools, Neil O'Brien, the Dean of Cayuga County Superintendent. Do you move up? Are you number 1 at that point?
I'm moving up.
You're moving up. The Dean of Cayuga County Superintendents to talk about his service to this community as he retires this school year. We have a number of guests who will be here in the next couple of weeks, including Assemblyman John Lamondes, as well as City Manager Jeff Dygert, and Project Director Monica Salvage of the Healing Community Study to discuss the increase in opioid overdoses recently. And we'll also be back with our Zoom forum, which we're going to try this year with the Auburn Enlarged School District. It's scheduled for April 27th. I'll moderate the forum, and the questions will be asked, as usual, by Citizen Executive Editor Jeremy Boyer. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know that you can ask us to ask our guests questions or suggest questions to guests. We received a number from Mr. Pirozzolo today. You can send those questions to cozguytho@aol.com or Inside Government 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a good night, have a great tomorrow, be safe, and we will see you back here in the studio on Thursday when we discuss East Hill Medical.